stories, story lovers. Yes, it's kind of all in my channel. And I'll tell you one thing. It's important that you have a variety, I really do think, because true crime has been really, has been emotionally wearing on me. Not that I don't love it, I do. But to constantly do it and constantly read about it and constantly think about it, it's, it's a little bit, it can be frustrating. So I'm going to go back to David Pallades, the missing 411. We're now, tonight, we are in Arizona. Last night we were in Northern California, Nevada, and Idaho. Like I've said before, I'm doing all of the younger ones under, like 10 and under, and then I will go up to the 10 and over till about 17, and then I'll be doing the adults. So, and because I think that there is a difference in what happens and how they leave so quickly. Like I don't know if you realize a 2-year-old cannot walk 10, 15, sometimes 30 miles up treacherous landscape. I mean, it's just not possible. But it is. It happens, which is so bizarre to me. So Arizona. Just gonna put my notes and my book right there. So now let's talk about Roy Rogers. Disappeared on 1/15/1936. Roy Rogers missing 1/15/1936. Bisbee, Arizona. Age of disappearance 4 years old. That's like such a baby. Bisbee, Arizona is located at the far southeastern corner of the state. So it's the southeastern corner. Just 2 miles from the Mexican border. The city sits among the only mountain range for at least 10 miles in any direction. The locals call the hills the Guadalupe Mountains, and they hold a portion of the Geronimo Trail. On January 15th, 1936, Mr. and Mrs. Ira Rogers and their 4-year-old son Roy were visiting Roy's uncle at his home. The L.W. McDonald Ranch. There was conflicting reports this was the grandfather's property, but it does appear this was the uncle's home. So maybe he just lived there even though the grandfather owned it. I don't, that doesn't really matter as far as the missing part, I don't think. But maybe it does. But it does appear this was the uncle's home. So, while the family was visiting, Roy somehow disappeared from the ranch with his 4-year-old child. The local sheriff was notified almost immediately, and a massive search. So the first day of the searching produced no results. Nothing, no clothes, no bones, nothing, no tracks. The following day, the military commanding general from Mexico heard of the search and sent his private plane to assist in the search until the boy was found. The United States sent 3 planes from Marchfield in California and a detachment of Indian scouts from Fort Huachuca responded to track the boy. I'm sorry if I pronounced puzzling to him and to me that kids disappear from friends and relatives' homes and seem to be eventually found in that 1.5 to 2 mile range. It is always difficult to understand why children do not respond to the searchers, because remember, it's not like they waited a full day to start searching. They were searching for this boy immediately sight of Trent. The family, of course, got alarmed and started to run through the area, yelling his name, looking for the boy, and he had just vanished. So immediately they call the Forest Services, the deputies, anybody that could help them find this little 3-year-old boy. I mean, he's just a baby. So the deputies and Forest Service personnel calling Trent's name and never getting an answer. Helicopters searched until dark. Bloodhounds scoured the area trying to pick up a scent, but nothing seemed National Park. Alfred disappeared from his parents as they walked along a river. Days later, a husband and wife saw a small boy on a rock ledge high above the mountainside with no adults in sight. So the National Park personnel heavily searched that area, but Alfred was never found. Now, is written about other young girls that have been supposedly taken by something described as a large wolf or bear. And this is the first article that he has ever found where an adult got close view of the abductor, being the wolf. And just in case you are not aware, news articles in the late 1800s and early 1900s usually do not include children's names. In articles, they describe children by their association to the parent, which is why she's called Mr. Dumfries' daughter and not by her name. To describe children by their association to the parent, the fact that Dumfries' daughter's name was not in the article was not unusual. So he views this, the location of this incident, as unique and important. Ewing was a remote city. The Dumfries lived in the hills outside the city, extremely remote. In the Missing 411 United States, he writes about other incidences involving children taken in Montana by mammals described as wolves or bears. The next one is Kenneth Crandall. So she is found safe, thank God. are super kids. I mean, they're just like unbelievable. Unbelievable that is. Kids usually get worn out. I mean, you can't get them to walk a mile when they're that little. But to walk 8 miles, that's amazing. It was hard to imagine that searchers ever believed that Kenneth could have wandered 8 miles from his residence. Thus, the rescuers did not find him. Of course, it's because, like I was saying, that generally speaking, a child that age will not go out of a 2 to 3 mile range. The deputy sheriff stated that it was believed that Kenneth died inside the first 24 hours. If he did die that quickly, I don't believe the boy had starved to death. That would be impossible. As the lady says, he had just eaten dinner. Remember that? It also is hard to believe that any boy could have hiked 8 miles while being only 2.5 years old. In researching, now this is the lady speaking in a summary. In researching this disappearance and the articles describing this disappearance, there was quite a variety of descriptions of the boy. Some articles stated that the boy was 3 years old, while others stated that he was just a mile away from his house, not 6 or 8, I'm sorry. And honestly, even today, it is truly amazing the different stories that the newspapers can tell from one to the next. So, they twist the story and they get it so wrong. There is a documented cluster of missing people just southeast of Billings, to which Kenneth's disappearance is added. So that, I mean, I don't think he died of hunger. And I think it's strange that the sheriff said, oh, he died within the first 24 hours of hunger and exposure when he'd just eaten dinner. So it did not get very cold that night, and he had his dog with him the whole time. I don't know, I think that's very strange that the sheriff was very quick to say that. I don't know, I mean, I'm skeptical about everybody, but that's pretty strange that he was, jumped the gun on that one. I mean, isn't it? I mean, he just is so sure of himself. Oh, he died within the first night. No big deal. I mean, how does he know that? That's my question. Unless he had something to do with it for some reason. There's always the possibility that, not that I'm saying that these people were bad or anything, but there's always the possibility of foul play. It's not always rainbows and butterflies, you know what I mean? Especially back then, when news, even though it was reported, was so different from one newspaper to the next, and they kind of fabricated a lot of their information. If they wanted to think, oh, well, that's impossible that he could have been 8 miles from where he was, or maybe they just never got the information and wanted to post something, so they made up something that sounded logical, but in reality, he was 8 miles from the house. And I agree, I do not think he was dead within the first 24 hours, especially from hunger. He had just eaten food. We're gonna move on to Utah, to the Utah mountains. Well, I'm gonna do a really long, sorry, my hair. Going to do a really long ranch sat just 15 miles from Bryce Canyon National Park and 50 miles exactly east of the location where Marlon Robb disappeared. I will confirm that this is a very rare event when people disappear in close proximity to each other, unless they are part of a cluster. Now these were not. So the family was enjoying the barbecue, they were enjoying their 4th of July party, and they had several children with them in attendance, so, you would think that one would take care of the others, the older ones. In the early afternoon, the Youngs realized they could not find Valante and started to search. Searchers did find the girl's teddy bear near the perimeter of the barbecue. So, she had dropped her teddy bear, the last location where she was observed. I don't know how I guess you could look over and then you look away and they're gone, but that's a lot of span. I don't know, it's kind of strange. July 6, 1956 article in the Post-Register had a witness statement related to the little girl. Quote, Valante has gone up the hill and won't come back down. Unquote. A cousin told other members of the family that stirred the search that lasted until dark. Quote, the search was started just 10 minutes after the girl was last seen. I don't know about that. It was unclear why the cousin stated that the girl would not come back. Several hundred searchers were covering the local hills those first 2 days looking for the girl. So why would the cousin say that? That would be my biggest question. How would he know this? You know what I mean? That sounds a little bit suspicious to me. I don't know, that's just strange. Because there's hundreds of searchers looking for this girl, and they cannot find her even though he knows for a fact she was in the hills and would not come down. So, quote, the Post-Register writes an article, quote, authorities familiar with the area discounted the possibility that a wild animal might have snatched the child. The irrigation canal that ran through the area was drained without success, unquote. They did not find her there either. As the search moved forward, bloodhounds, especially trained to search for lost people, were flown into Bryce Canyon National Park and driven to the Youngs' ranch. Both bloodhounds tracked the girl from the ranch to a rural road and then stopped as if somebody picked her up. Authorities stated that it was possible that Valante was abducted, but that was a small possibility. But if you ask me, the cousin saying that she was up in the mountains or the hills and would not come down doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. I know it sounds crazy. I'm just gonna switch this to that to see what kind of reception we get. So, okay, now she's completely gone. They have flown in bloodhounds that are trained to find this child or children from a series of places that need to go in a pattern so they don't miss a thing. Searches back then were actually almost more complete than ours today because we kind of rely on technology to help us out. But honestly, the best way to find somebody is really to get the searchers out there. July 15th, 1956, articles in the Times News had this update on the search. Quote, Sheriff DeWard Woodward says he has ended a search for a 2-year-old Idaho girl who disappeared from a family picnic on a remote southern Utah ranch. Quote, we feel the child is not in the area, unquote, Woodward said. After 10 intensive days of searching, with hundreds of searchers on foot and horseback and helicopters in planes, and dogs, rescue dogs, they found no evidence at all except for the girl's teddy bear. I mean, nothing, just that she had gone out to the road and disappeared. 3 years after Valante disappeared, there was an update. In the April 6, 1959, Ogden Standard. So, quote, the disappearance of a 15-month-old Idaho girl remains unsolved in this southern Utah community. After investigation passed the 3-year mark. Later in the same article, quote, Valante Young, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Gary Young of Mountain View, Idaho, is still missing almost 3 years after she disappeared while visiting with her parents at a ranch near Woodstow. Alright, before I read his summary, I'm just gonna say nobody ever went back to the cousin for more information, and that bothers me a lot. I feel like he had more information than he was letting on. So Valante says the fact that a 15-month-old girl was missing just 10 minutes before search efforts were initiated, and she could not be located, seems surreal. How could a girl that young, move that fast without some type of assistance? The girl was not in the surrounding alfalfa fields, not in the irrigation canal, and seemingly nowhere in the surrounding 3 miles. The location of this event was extremely rural. There were only neighboring farmers and ranchers. This would not be a location that someone would accidentally stumble by Yes, you read that right. Searchers estimated that Bruce had traveled 20 miles. Why would he do that? Was he following something? Did he feel a pull from somewhere? Searchers estimate that Bruce had traveled nearly 20 miles to go to the location where he was found. Later in that same article, Carpenter said the following, quote, Mr. Carpenter said that he was amazed that the boy came down over some 500-foot high cliffs to reach the trail along the north fork of the Dutchensee River, or Dutchson Sea. Sorry if I get these words wrong. So, unquote. So let's review this. Because this is quite interesting. The boy goes to use the restroom and ends up 4 days later walking down a 500-foot cliff to get to a trail that is 20 miles from where he was last at with his family. That doesn't, a 7-year-old, it doesn't, they've got more, mental aptitude than that. And there's something, this young man was fine. This is what the lady said. Let's review the last few sentences. The boy walks over 20 miles in 30 hours and then successfully goes over the top and back down 500-foot cliffs. Each search and rescue manual that he has ever reviewed indicates that boys 7 to 9 years old will only be found inside a radius of 7.2 miles. 95% of the time. And that could be over a period of a week, not 30 hours. Bruce was returned to his parents, where he stated that he was hungry. He stated that he had drank water from a waterfall and slept between 2 logs. He explained that as he was sleeping, so this is a 7-year-old, so he can explain pretty coherently and pretty, fitfully what happened. He said a deer jumped over the top of him, and he had seen many animals during his trip. He never explained how he got lost or what he did in the early moments when he disappeared. What was something pulling at him to go farther into the woods? Why would a 7-year-old say, I'm going to use the restroom, and then not come back to his family? These are the things that sit heavy on my mind, because I just feel there's a power or a energy out there that is drawing some of these kids into the woods deeper, and they're not even really aware of it. That's a crazy amount of period ground to cover in that amount of time. Wayment. So I want to talk as the marriage went forward, things went south, as sometimes they do. And Paul left, asking the court for full custody of Gage. The case went to court, and Mrs. Wayment eventually lost custody of all her children. And Paul became Mr. Mom for Gage, and the two were inseparable, Gage and his father. Paul had a love of the outdoors and took the boy with him everywhere he went. So he went camping, he'd take him. When he went to the grocery store, he'd take him. Anywhere, when he went to work, he would take him. And they were trekking through the forest, looking at sights, and generally being best buddies. Because remember, he was in construction. So, on October 25th, 2001, Paul, age 37, placed Gage in his car seat behind him in the 1997 Dodge pickup. The boys were headed to a private deer hunting spot on the east side of Elk Reservoir at the Chalk Creek Basin at approximate elevation of 8,000 feet. It was approximately noon when Paul stopped his truck, walked to the gate, and correctly applied the combination to the lock. He opened the gate, entered the private domain, closed the gate behind him, and relocked it. He drove to a spot he felt would be a good location to scout for deer. Paul stopped the truck, turned around, and saw Gage asleep in his full-length blue pajamas that covered his feet. The little beaties on feet. Paul was planning on being gone only a short time and decided to leave Gage locked in the truck, warm and strapped in his seat. Paul left to look for the deer. While he was out looking, he saw several groups and apparently got preoccupied. Paul returned to the truck various times. Times vary on this from 30 to 90-minute intervals to find the door at Gage's side open and Gage gone the last time he checked. So Paul ran through the area calling Gage's name and did not get an answer, which of course would be very strange because they are best buddies. He drove down the private road to the camp and contacted two hunters who had also happened to drive in that afternoon. The hunters told Paul that they had seen his son in the truck smiling when they drove by, so he was there. The hunters agreed to help in the search, and the trio left. The men searched for Gage and soon realized they needed more assistance, and so they contacted the Summit County Sheriff's Office. The first deputy arriving at the scene found a frantic scene as the deputy was trying to gather facts about Gage. Paul was vomiting and stating that if the boy died, it was his fault. He left him alone. Paul slowly calmed down, and the information about Gage was given. searchers and deputies and friends that scoured the mountains for the small boy, he couldn't have gone far. Several bloodhounds were brought to the scene and apparently could not find the scent again. This is very common in all these cases. After 4 long and cold days of searching, the Summit County Sheriff made a determination that they could not find Gage. Wayment, the investigative arm of the sheriff's office, was concerned that the boy of a 2-year-old boy could not be found. Searchers would continually ask themselves how a 2-year-old could get outside an area they were searching. There was initial concern that Gage may have been kidnapped. That theory was quickly quelled when all realized that access to this area is tightly controlled by lock and gate. The 2 hunters assisted Paul with the initial search, affirmed that they were the only people in that area when Gage vanished. Yes, it may be just a lock and gate, but somebody could be on foot on the other side and have grabbed him. Just a thought. After the search by the sheriff's office was terminated, the very next morning 150 private citizens arrived, ready and willing to continue the search for this little boy. There were additional rumors that Paul had hidden Gage in an effort to permanently keep him from his mother. There were also rumors that Paul had killed Gage. This did not make sense because of what the hunters had observed. The child was in there smiling and waving. When the volunteers arrived Monday morning to search, James White Wilkes, a 35-year-old owner of pet care facility in Salt Lake City, Utah, arrived with his black schnauzer, Dino, to assist James, and a short-haired, clean-cut man who was also a woman. If you saw a photo of James, he would remind you of a rugged-looking Marine, strong and determined. So some searchers stayed in pairs. James stayed where Gage was last seen as morning turned afternoon, and then early night James and Dino were lost. Yes, the searchers themselves, a small hole under a tree, and this is where he sat bundled with Dino for one of the coldest nights of their lives. James was not sure if he slept at all during the night, but he is sure that he probably started back up at 5 a.m. Wilkes states that he had a few minutes when he noticed his dog bent over a small bulge buried in 5 inches of snow. Wilkes slowly got over to Dino's position and realized the dog was now licking the face of Gage. Wayment. Gage was lying in a fetal position facing uphill under the snow. His hands were clenched in fists, and his eyes were open with frozen tears in them. The blue footy pajamas were pulled up to his knees, and his throat was blue. The boy was dead. James made one last observation before placing Gage in his arms. He saw canine tracks in the immediate area that were not death of Gage, he stated that he had not, and Paul passed the polygraph with flying colors. As Paul jumped through one legal investigative hoop to another, he was having his own internal struggles with understanding how Gage had gotten out of his truck. Paul's sister stated that Paul would regularly go out to the truck and work the locks and the buckles, never understanding how Gage was able to accomplish such a feat, meaning that there was no way, they had those safety locks from inside. There's no way this child could have gotten out of the car himself. Somebody had to have let him out. Sheriff's investigators continued their investigation by having the medical examiner perform an autopsy on Gage. The cause of death was exposure, yet the examiner could not determine when Gage died. Investigators took their case to the deputy district attorney and made their feelings known about possible prosecution. Everyone agreed that Paul had made a severe mistake. The personal feelings of the investigator was that Paul was the type of person who would live with this incident for the rest of his life. His own personal hell. It would never leave him. He loved this child. There was no malintent to hurt this child. The DA's office had a different feeling about the prosecution. The amount of time Paul had left Gage in his truck had varied according to reports from 30 to 90 minutes, and they could not pin it any closer. He left the boy in a cold environment, strapped in a car seat, alone. The boy had exited the seat and somehow managed to cross miles of wilderness to his eventual place of death. Paul was eventually charged with one count of misdemeanor negligent homicide, but nobody interviewed the guy who never left the area that Gage was in when he left the car, and never asked, I don't see where this guy said, look, I was in this area and got lost, just walking around in a circle. They were looking, everyone else was looking elsewhere. He wanted to just look in that area, and it ended up getting lost, I guess, ending up miles from where he had even thought he traveled. So that's two people. I mean, that's kind of strange. On June 5th, after much discussion with his attorney and family, Paul Wayment pled guilty to one count of negligent homicide. Paul did not want to put the others in the way of public humiliation by testifying. He knew what he did, and family members felt as though Paul wanted to pay a price for his actions. I still don't know how the child got out of his car seat, out of the car, and then miles away from where he was found. His booties from his feet, those little feetsy pajamas have been torn and pulled up. Just too strange. And then that guy that with this dog had gotten lost in that tiny little area and had ended up miles away, and he had no idea how he got there. Paul read the sheriff's reports and found the location where Gage died. This became a location he regularly went to meditate. He eventually built a small shrine to Gage alone, and at the last location that Gage had ever known. Paul had talked with his sister about his feelings of suicide, but his house, but no answer. It was at this point that the people started to feel the worst. Several individuals went to Paul's meditation location and found his body lying next to his rifle. So what does Paul IDs think? In his many years of investigating missing people, he says, "I don't believe I've ever investigated a story with so many twists and turns and agony, but this isn't why the story is in this book," he says. "Let me first state that I can only try to feel what Paul felt after losing his son. Horrible. I mean, it's a pain you never want anybody to feel." He believed that Paul was a decent man who had made a bad decision, probably the one decision he would forever haunt any loving parent. "I don't believe it was the court's decision to incarcerate or the district attorney to prosecute. It was the ethics of the man that put him in such a strife." I do agree with that. Gage really, he's questioning how Gage got out of this truck, unlocking locks, pulling on doors, handles, etc. "I was imagining the same thing. I've documented many cases where the weather turns bad after a child vanishes and it starts to snow near midnight." James Wilkes, fascinating story where he was, very similar. I mean, it just started to snow and snow and snow. Why hadn't the dogs reacted, but their paw prints were all around Gage's body? So he had read tales where the animals are reluctant or afraid of approaching another dead animal in specific situations. Was that what was happening here? But why? These were trained dogs. But they weren't cadaver dogs. There's a difference. Gage was found just a little over 2 miles from the point he was last seen. Several articles claim it was an area that had been searched thoroughly. Again, a situation that occurs far too many times in the incidents that Mr. Paulides has investigated. He does not condone what Paul did by leaving Gage in the truck. It was a horrific case of bad judgment, but I feel compassion for his loss. And I do too, but I still feel that there's something more to this, because it just doesn't make sense that this man that had his dog had it the same, did hardly move and yet ended up miles away and was so lost he had to put the body down when he found Gage to, that was never brought up again, and I thought that was really, really bizarre. Maybe the guy just didn't want his name put in the paper or brought into it, but there is something, I don't know if somebody followed them out there a circle, and then all of a sudden he got lost when he found Gage's